Your powers are weak, old man.
You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Talk about sex. See, it's always like a negative on the guy. And if you can't get past date 2, for how many, for multiple guys, the problem is not the guys.
Yeah. I mean, but that's also what I'm trying to figure out. So I've been working on myself 26 years. So I haven't just been doing nothing.
I didn't say you were. I'm saying that this is a common refrain in modern dating. The guys seem to just be sex, sex, sex. Well, if you look on what's the modern woman really selling today, do most women sell femininity? No. Do they sell wifely skills, like being able to be a good homemaker, a cook, a good keeper of a home, a good mother, a good raiser of children? No, most women are selling sex. Long eyelashes, weave, long fingernails, overly sexualized. That's what most women are selling. So you can't be mad that that's what men are buying.
Hey folks, this is one I wanted to read for a while because I thought it kind of put a spotlight on kind of like the mating practice of most American black women, ADOS as we like to call them. And this is from the book David Graeber's Debt the First 5,000 Years. And it's not a black book per se. In fact, it's not a book about race or any kind of creed or color. It's about how wealth and debt and money are actually negotiated amongst civilizations and societies. But I thought this one was actually a pretty good read. It's actually a pretty good section as it compares to black people, because I think, like I said, I think this is a mating practice of most black women in the United States, or at least what they aspire to. After paying an appropriate fee in raffia cloth to the village treasury, they were permitted to build a collective house, and then they were either allotted a wife to put in it or allowed to form a party that would try to steal one from a rival village. Or alternatively, if one showed up as a refugee, they would ask the rest of the village for the right to accept her. This was invariably granted. The common wife is what's referred to as a village wife. The position of the village wife was more than respectable. In fact, a newly married village wife was treated very much like a princess. She was not expected to plant or weed in the garden, fetch wood or water, or even to cook. All household chores were done by eager young husbands who provided the best of everything, spending much of their time hunting in the forest, vying to bring her the choicest delicacies or plying her with palm wine. She could help herself to others' possessions and was expected to make all sorts of mischief to the bemused indulgence of all concerned. She was also expected to make herself sexually available to all members of the said perhaps 10 or 12 different men. At first, pretty much whenever they wanted her. Over time, a village wife would usually settle down with just 3 or 4 of her husbands, and finally just one. The domestic arrangements were flexible. Nonetheless, in principle, she was married to the village as a whole. If she had children, the village was considered to be their father, and as much expected to bring them up, provide them with resources, and eventually get them properly married off, which is why villages had to maintain collective treasuries full of raffia and camwood bars in the first place, since at any time a village was likely to have several village wives. Interesting. It would also have its own children and grandchildren, and therefore be in a position to demand and pay blood debts and thus to accumulate pawns. As a result, the villages become corporate bodies, much like the state. Collective groups that, like modern corporations, had to be treated as if they were individuals for purposes of law. However, there was only one key difference. Unlike ordinary individuals, villages could back up their claims with force. And this section it's in a response to polygamy. In other words, when you have rich men that have more than one wife or have a collection of wives and kind of drain the resources of women, women away, so there's not a one-to-one distribution of men to women, to keep order and keep the young men from trying to sleep with, quote unquote, one of the many wives that one of the richer men have. What they would do is basically do this. Basically, polyandry, and polygamy actually were side by side, where they would have more than women would have more than one husband. Like I said, the village wife would basically have sex. Basically, she'd be the town prostitute, except it was respected, right? She was there to serve a purpose. She was there to have sex with all the men and keep order, which a lot of black women actually do in the black community. There's a whole lot of black women that sleep with a whole lot of guys. And people talk about the 80-20 rule, where you have a whole bunch of women trying to get with one guy that has a whole bunch of resources, which would make sense if those women were not having sex with other men. So just because you have say like a rapper, or you have a athlete that has a wife or has a wife and a bunch of side chicks, they're not just sleeping with just him. Especially in the black community, black women are actually sleeping with a whole bunch of other guys. They just are. And as much as the stats would like to say that only 25% of people cheat, reportedly cheat. I mean, there's many books that say that people lie on that stat, men and women. I've seen as high as 40% of women and men cheat. That's in marriage, even though marriage is especially very, very low in the black community. Only 25% of black women are actually married. And black women, not as a rule, but I'm saying is, as a rule, black women sleep with more than one guy, and they go through more than one guy. What they would like is to be serially monogamous, instead of sleeping with 12 men at once and have like a train run through, which is not really accepted in the society. If they were accepted, trust me, if it was accepted, black women would be doing it. If it was accepted, black women would be doing it. What black women actually do is sleep with one guy at a time, but they rotate. Unfortunately, they rotate 4 guys per year. So that is what they call a village wife. And in essence, that's what they would call a village wife, where they actually settle down with 3 or 4, or have 3 or 4 husbands, and have children by several different ones, and then expect the whole village to take care of it. That's exactly what Diane Stewart wanted with the Africana kinship, where the children belong to the village. So she could have babies by 3 or 4 different guys, and the village or the state would actually take care of it, which is why you saw Monahan's scissors. This is actually, this kind of thinking, I don't know if it's transferred from the continent to here, or it was actually played upon by the slave masters. But however this mix got into the culture, basically the United States, they don't control it the proper way. So it hasn't gone wild. I wouldn't say it's gone wild, but it's become very, very common, especially in the black community. You don't see other women of other races having multiple kids by multiple men the way you see black women do it. You see it, but you don't see it that often, which is why it's very common for black children to have different names inside one family. And the women actually still have them. Women will carry multiple men's children in one container. Basically, they're all raised together under the mother. They're all her children. And they're all her children, but they all belong to the village at the same time. And the whole village, or a group of men, just like in this, a group of men are expected to take care of all the siblings, while she still has her choice. I think most black women want to be village wives, even though they can't. I think they're restrained because of social pressure, especially white social pressure, because this is really not accepted by the Europeans, and we do live in a European culture. But even though it's not accepted, a lot of black women actually do this stuff. At least they used to. I think since the expense of children is so high now, I think a lot of women, especially black women, are not having them because they don't want to have the expense. Instead of having kids, they're having multiple men. In fact, they're like the village wife without the children. I think that's the only, with birth control, that's what's happened. Black women have become village wives without the children. So instead of having one or two or maybe three relationships throughout their whole entire lifespan, they're having, just like the village wife, they're having 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 relationships. Even Kevin was talking to a young woman in Albany that had been rather sedate. You know, she's rather sedate, she's rather conservative. But even she was dating, like trading guys in every 90 days. And that's like when Kevin see women in their 30s and what's your longest relationship? They say 3 years or 2 years. And said, okay, when was that? It was when they were teenagers. And they asked you, when have you dated since, or you haven't dated seriously since? Well, how long do you normally your relationships actually last? And she said like 90 days, at the most 6 months. So they're going through 2 or 3 guys a year. Over 10 years, the bodies do pile up. And even though they're saying they're not having sex with them, it's kind of hard to, in this day and age, to go through a relationship for 90 days and not have sex. Most guys are not going to date you for 90 days without having sex. Most of them aren't. So black women are piling up bodies like it's cordwood, and they're becoming basically de facto village wives. And guess what? Guys have adjusted to it. They've accepted these village wives for nothing but sex. In fact, just like the book says, like the page says, is that they're not expected to cook, clean, or do any kind of chores, right? They're just there to accept the men as they come in and have sex with them when they want, right? So basically, they're there for sex. They're not there for anything else. And this is what black women that come out, it asks what they bring to the table, and it's always me. In other words, like Kevin was saying, it's just sex. And that's what a village wife brings. A village wife brings sex. And 90% of the women that are out there that do come on, that you even talk to, you ask them, what do they bring? What do you bring to your man? What do you do for him while you're dating him? And invariably, it's nothing. That's what a village wife does. It's nothing. She brings herself. She brings the sex or the possibility of sex. And that's why I think most black women want to be what is termed a communal or village wife or corporate wife. And it's when I read it, when I first read it, it was just in passing, because he was talking about how men and women organize themselves, and how if a woman said she didn't want to get married, or she didn't want to get married to a particular guy that her family picked for her, that she would run to another village and petition to become a village wife, because she didn't want to get settled down marrying and becoming a wife, a proper wife, just to a particular man in her own village, right? So she would escape, run to another village, ask for sanctuary, and become this communal wife. And to take the pressure of young men off of everybody else, they would accept her. So her job is to screw all the unattached men, which white women actually dig if they could actually get it. That's a dream for a white woman. And black women already do it, but black women want to do it in a more respectable way, which is serial monogamy. So they say it's serial monogamy. But I think there's some kind of creep back, some kind of fall back to other guys, to past exes, that's kind of under the cover. But I think that a lot of black women want to accept respectability and the kind of responsibilities that go along with it, like raising their kids, doing basic chores, being domesticated, bringing value to one man. But it's easy to become a village wife where you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is have sex. And I think a lot of black women have bought into that deal. And I think a lot of men have bought into that deal. But the thing is, in an unordered society where the village doesn't have control of this kind of sexual behavior, it gets kind of wild. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing all this wild behavior because in a Africana kinship or a village, as they say, then the responsibility of the village is to take care of each child as a collective. And we don't have it set up quite that way, even though the state has come in and become the village, so to speak, the leader of the village, the corporate entity that takes care of a collective of children because the children actually belong to the state. And so this cultural pattern that's built into black women exhibited itself like that. Like I said, when I first read it, I said, this is just black women having multiple children by multiple men, and then the village or the state or the collective has to come in and take care of the children. And that's what you see with welfare, child support, Section 8, all that kind of stuff. I saw this when I was working. I actually saw this when I saw black women have 4 or 5 kids by 4 different guys and collecting 4 child support checks. They were in essence a village wife. Serially, but they were a village wife. And at the end, when they got old, when they got past the wall, they would settle down with one. So that's like we see 40-year-old women, either married or baby mamas, trying to find one guy to actually settle down with and marry because they've been a village wife for most of their career. I thought this was interesting. I'm not going to make this too long. I had been meaning to do this and put this out into the record to see what people think. And when I first saw it, like I said in Graeber's book, it spoke to me. Let's put it that way. It spoke to me, and I'm surprised that since the book's been out, I think the book came out, 2015, 2014, the 6 or 7 years that it's been out, that no black person, well, black people don't really read, so especially a book like Graeber's. So I'm not surprised that a black man would not have grabbed this and put this moniker out into the ether. But hey, that's my job, I suppose. Anywho, I'm going to jump off here. This is Beach Just Out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.